Hi there, I'm Katie Burrell, retired comedian, professional leisure athlete, and host of The Arc of It, a new podcast from Arc'teryx Academy that at its most basic aims to recreate this major element that we're missing from the Academy's going digital: in-person conversations with our idols. Obviously, with the pandemic, we can't sit down together and are recording this remotely, but I'm trying to pretend like we're in a theater, sitting in plush chairs, mics in hand, and doing these interviews to a live audience, which in a perfect world, you, the listener, would be in attendance at. And after the interview, we'd mingle, we'd chat, we'd have a drink, and we might be so lucky to actually connect. What an impossible bliss that feels like these days. Our guest today is Michelle Parker, who really needs no introduction. Michelle talks as fast as she moves, and listening to her story of being discovered amongst legends on the slope of Squaw Valley, which she's quick to point out is undergoing a much-needed renaming process, I was even more blown away by not only the career Michelle is having, but also the pure flow that she exists in. I can't imagine someone living out their calling more than this woman is. We talk about the inherent motivation that some of us have, some of us lack, and all of us need to channel, and weave through the leveling up that our society is currently being faced with as we shift away from an individualistic or selfish approach to our lives and careers and into a more conscious, aware, and collective understanding of what it means to be truly passionate about something and share it. In this case, sport. Here's Michelle. Okay, so you are our first guest on The Arc of It. So glad that you're here. The idea here with this podcast is essentially, it's as if we're in that theater in Jackson and you were on stage with me and I was interviewing you like Bill Briggs. Totally. And I'm Greg Hill interviewing you, but I have cooler footwear than he did last year.
And your belly's not going to show.
And I'm also not wearing tear-off pants.
Yeah.
As just basic rules. And so we're just going to chat as if life was still kind of normal. Can we just walk through your career? Like, how did you get to where you are now? You're in Jackson, based out of Tahoe, in Jackson currently. Like, let's just rewind 20 years. When did it start? How did it start? You're one of the pioneers. I think everyone would love to just get that kind of like snapshot of it. Like, how does Michelle Parker become Michelle Parker from the top?
Okay. I'll try to make it concise, but I think I've been a professional skier now for 18 years, which is more than half my life. I would consider my first sponsor at the age of 15, which is right when I quit racing. And so racing kind of gave me this technical background and the ability to ski, I guess. And then, I kind of, while I was racing, I was dabbling in the park because I had a bunch of guy friends and I was a full-on tomboy. And this guy came up to me and I had a braid and he was like, "Oh, I thought you were a guy until I noticed your braid." And he was like, "I want to give you my business card and I'd love to send you some skis." It was Jason Leventhal. And at the time he owned Line Skis. So that was my first real official sponsor. And that kind of happened right as I quit racing. My ski coaches at the time said that I wasn't allowed to go upside down and I wasn't allowed to ski with the guys and I needed to like show up on time for training. And I was like, peace, I'm out.
This isn't my thing.
Yeah, totally.
And when you got that business card, were you like freaking out?
Oh, freaking out. And I still have the business card.
Aw.
And I think the tagline for Line at the time was "because skiing needs a future." And it's like kind of a prized possession that I've kept with me because it started everything. And I think back in the day at that point in time, I didn't really honestly see it as a possibility. Like there
Right.
weren't a lot of women in that space making a living out of it and doing it as a professional. There were a few, but they weren't even in my face. Like the Jamie Burge, the Wendy Fisher, like that older generation that came before me, like I wasn't even exposed to them that much. Back then, the media they didn't give enough women love. So the people that like were really at the forefront for me were like the Christy Leskinen, Sarah Burke, further down the road, like Ingrid Backstrom. But at the time it was like, yeah, posters of Ingrid or posters of Sarah and Christy on my wall for sure. And anytime Jen Berg or like Wendy or any of those girls, I had those on my wall too. But there was such a lack of female representation. I just didn't see it as a possibility. But yeah, fast forward, Jason gave me this card. I started going to slopestyle competitions where there was maybe like 8 to 10 competitors.
Right.
And super small women's field, US Open, X Games came around down the road a little bit later. I was invited for the very first X Games, which was half pipe, which I didn't consider to be my specialty. I was more slopestyle. um, and performed well as slopestyle. And then I think it was like around the time that, like, the whole time I was competing, I was also taking every opportunity that came my way. And I think that's like a key thing that I would pass on to younger generations, is just to say yes and show up and do your very best, because that's what I just did continuously. And that just opened up more opportunities and more doors. And so I started filming for, I don't know, there was like Theory 3 Media back then, Poor Boys Productions, Warren Miller, like anyone who came up and wanted to film, I'd go. And I primarily filmed with Poor Boys,
Mhm.
which was like Pep and Tanner and all those guys were in the movies. It was really cool. And yeah, worked with them for a number of years. And that was the first like big movie breaks that I got. I think it was Yeah Dude, maybe it was the name of the film.
Yeah,
I think.
dude. Poor
Yeah.
boy. It's so interesting. You're like 18 years ago. It's like really not that long that there wasn't female representation.
Totally.
Yeah,
It wasn't that long ago. And there was like, but such on a small level that like even
totally.
me as a consumer couldn't find that stuff. And so yeah, I started filming, and then I had a major knee injury. Well, I had an ACL when I was 18 at the European Open, and then came back from that, and I got the opportunity to film with Matchstick. And growing up in Squaw and in Tahoe, that was like the biggest, that was like what I wanted to do, because I would rent, the movie theater or the movie place would rent Matchstick movies and Warren Miller movies, but it was pretty much all Matchstick that I was watching. And Gaffney lived there, and they had a huge presence there. Obviously, Shane McConkey, JT Holmes, Ingrid Backstrom, like all of these people were, CR Johnson, filming with Matchstick in my backyard. And so I would
Legends.
literally like follow Shane around the mountain and be like, oh, that's them. And they didn't know who I was, but I was like trying to keep up and see where they were skiing. And actually the way that Matchstick found out about me was, it was really cool, because the fingers off of KT 22 is one of the most notorious lines at the resort, and you can see it from the chairlift. And there's like,
Is
yeah,
that spa?
yeah, exactly. Which I should mention, they're going through the process of changing their name in a really cool, respectful way, and I'm really excited about that. So Squaw soon to be named something else, we don't know yet.
Okay.
um, yeah. And so the fingers were there, and I went up, like I had like fourth chair with one of my guy friends, and he was like, all right, we're gonna go hit main air. And he's like, just stay hot on my heels, I promise I'll stomp it. And I was like probably 15 at the time, and I was like, okay, sweet. And it's like a solid, depending on the snow level, like 30, 40, like it's a pretty big air. And I was like, all right,
Yeah.
I'm gonna follow you down there, we have first tracks, this is perfect. And I'm like hot on his tire, on his wheels, and I fully clip a tree and eat shit before the cliff. And so he went off of it. I got lost. I like skied around, and I was like, oh, I'm so bummed, Ryan. Like I clipped a tree. I totally bailed. The whole like chairlift was watching me.
Oh
And
no.
then it was like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Everything's totally tracked. And he was like, I see a landing. We could probably go still hit it. And
Oh
you're
my
15. You're
God.
like, hell yeah, let's do it. And so we go back up there, and he hit it and I hit it right after him. We both stomp it and ski away. And Scott Gaffney happened to be on the chairlift with, I think, Cody Townsend.
This is
And
like a scene out of a movie, like
yeah.
the feature film of your life.
And I think Scott was like, who is that girl? And Cody was like an older brother. He's known me since I was like a baby, basically. So he was
Yeah,
like,
you
oh,
guys
that's
grew
my
up
brother.
racing together or
Yeah, racing together. And then he was the same age as my brother. So they were pretty tight. And I was the annoying little sister, I'm
right.
sure. Yeah, but so then Gaffney called me up, and he was like, I know that none of our sponsors align, but I'd love to get you in front of the camera with Matchstick. And I started working with them at Squaw and got to film a little bit with Ingrid and Shane and JT, which was like full on dream come true. I think, getting the opportunity to be in the mountains with Shane was really special.
Oh
And I remember
yeah.
being like, oh my gosh, he is so good at skiing. Like it
Right.
was another level watching him. Like he would pick lines and I'd be like, I don't really even see that. And then he'd just lace them. And I was like, whoa, it was so cool. Highlight of my youth for sure. And then
Wow.
furthermore, finally got my sponsors in line with Matchstick, and I got like the full bore season with them rather than just shooting at my home mountain. And I landed on a rock off a cliff in Rotalic and did my ACL,
Ooh.
meniscus, medial patellofemoral, microfracture, like
Oof.
everything. I blew all the ligaments, had 2 surgeries, like a super long recovery process, couldn't ski for maybe like a year and a half. And then
Oh
when I
wow.
did get back on snow, it was like you could take one run one day, then wait 3 days, then take 2 runs and wait 3 days, then take 3 runs. So it was this really slow process getting back. And I think I was about 21 at that point, and it was right when the Olympics were announced for women's slopestyle. So I was still like highly like competing and placing in the top 3. So I was definitely a contender for the US team. But I had to go through this process of being like, okay, do I want to compete in the Olympics? Which like
Mm.
my uncle competed in the Olympics for water polo. Like my family has a bit of heritage there. And it kind of felt like a really cool thing to do and be a part of. Like I have so much respect for sport and athletics because of that. But ultimately, I was like, no, I want to ski powder with my friends. Like, I don't want to dedicate the next 3 years of my life to training for this very specific aspect of my sport. And so I basically told my sponsors I wasn't going to go for it, and they all left me, partially because of my injury. But it was pretty crazy at the time too, because I had just purchased a house. And so then all of a sudden I was like, oh, like can't pay my mortgage, can't pay my taxes, like got no money. I'm gonna lose it all and start over
Oh,
again. Like maybe I'll go get a job or go figure it out, like go back to school, who knows? But I was also like 21 years old, like who cares?
yeah.
Like
You're
I
like,
can start over again. Yeah.
totally.
Like
You
that was
still,
cool.
you still bounce if you fall 10 feet when you're
Yeah.
21.
Totally. But I like in my heart of all hearts, I knew that I wanted to be a professional skier and I wasn't done yet. So I basically reached out to Matchstick again and was like, hey, I lost all my sponsors, but I want to do this and I'm totally healed and good to go. And they went off of my word entirely. And there was one guy specifically, Steve Reska, who was a producer there and a cinematographer. And he just started lining me up with sponsors that were associated with Matchstick. At the time, it was Arc'teryx and Mountain Hardware and a few others, and that got me back on the roster. And then I didn't even know if I was ready. I was like, I haven't skied in like 2 years.
Right.
So then I was like, well, pressure's on. But also when I'm coming off an injury, I tend to like not have any pressure on myself because I'm like
Hmm.
coming off an injury, like what do they expect, you know?
Yeah.
But I ended up like having a really good year. I don't even think that I knew how good of a year it was. I kind of was just like, whatever, that was really fun. And then we went to the Matchstick World premiere, and I got off the airplane, and Steve Reska, who was then the cinematographer for Matchstick, was then hired onto Red Bull. And he picked me up from the airport with a Red Bull hat, and he just like put it on my head and was like, "You're on the team."
This is
Like,
too
what?
fun. This story is so much fun.
And I was blown away and then like totally laughing and giddy, like that's a dream come true. Like this is crazy. And then within minutes, I got a phone call that said I won Best Female Performance for IF3. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I went from rock bottom, like I'm gonna sell my house and like go to school again and quit everything to like boom, back on top, like full
Wow.
support. So it was really like this beautiful turnaround, and that injury was gnarly. Like the recovery
No
process was
kidding.
really painful.
Right.
It was a lot of time in the gym, like solid 6 hours every day, getting the shit kicked out of me. Like I was like on the table, like they were bending my knee to get the range of motion back. I know a lot of people with knee injuries go through this, and it was a really forceful thing. And I was like swearing and screaming in the PT unit with like a ton of other patients, and all of them were like, go Michelle, like we've got you. And but Gaffney actually had a knee injury, a super similar one at the same time. So he would be there like holding my hand, like, come on, girl, you've got this. And then I'd be like, let's go, Gaffney, you've got this. Like we had a really similar thing going on that was cool to do it together and have him as my partner. And then, yeah, just kind of started focusing on filming full bore. And for me in the beginning, that started out with urban rails and taking my tricks into the
Right.
backcountry. And like, I have so many old photos of me with a new era cap and super baggy stuff, like hitting
Yeah.
hills and like hilarious. But then I was spending a lot of time with JP Auclair. He
Mm.
was my boyfriend for 2 years during that time as well. And like my best friend, and like, just can't say enough good
No,
things about him.
such a fantastic guy.
Yeah, I think that like back then too, I was at this really impressionable age where I was figuring things out, and being surrounded by people like him kind of
Mm.
shaped a lot of my like life views. Like I credit him a lot for the way that I go about things. And I think,
Like be yourself or do it your way or
yeah, do it your way and like take interest in things
mm.
and dive in head first. Like he would edit his own segments. He would like figure out how to get Sigur Ross as the music. And he made these beautiful, like really powerful segments with Poor Boys. And he went from skiing moguls to big mountain to like doing all the tricks to like more bigger mountain to like mountaineering. And that's kind of been a similar path that I've been on, is like you continue to learn more and then you have a much like greater world to play with in the skiing industry anyways. You're like, okay, I went from park skiing to like skiing in the mountains, and then JP was like, you have to take your avalanche course. So I was 21,
Right.
I went up to Alaska, I took my avalanche course. Then I was ready for bigger mountains. The first time I ever went to Alaska was when I was 20. I turned 21 there. And it kind of just set me up for this path of like learning and then continuing to grow and learning more. And for me, that's helped me stay super engaged in skiing.
Yeah.
Like it's always something's interesting. I never get bored of it. I'm always learning. And that's like one of the most beautiful parts of this industry to me, is you're not like stuck in one lane. You can do whatever
Totally.
you want.
I mean, that's going to ask you, like, retrospectively making that decision to walk away from something as, an institution as iconic as the Olympics. Like, did you ever look back on that and have regrets, or did it feel supernatural? It sounds like you've been in flow for 18 years. So,
Yeah, I never looked back on it. That's a really good
mhm.
question. And I think part of that was watching so many of my girlfriends like dedicate those 3 years. And then
Yeah.
there was a lot of injuries, and a lot of those girls don't ski professionally anymore. I think I was like constantly looking for like, how do I continue to make this the most fun thing I can do?
Mm,
And the answer for me was like not being competitive with all my like friends. It was like, because I always compare, like there's competitive skiing where you're competing against everybody, and then there's filming where like everyone's on your team,
yeah.
and it's a very different feeling for me anyways. And that's ultimately what I love about filming, is you're going out with your friends and you're like, you've got each other's backs. And being in the mountains with like people, those relationships are so deep. For me, I never wanted to sever that or have it change because all of a sudden we were competing against each other. Since I took that avalanche course, I've been really studious and taking a bunch of different courses, whether they're just like kind of geared towards big mountains or crevasse rescue or medical courses, whatever that is.
Hmm.
That's really helped me hone in like my more mountaineering skills,
Hmm.
and the skill set you need to rescue in those situations, and or just like, yeah, I don't know, climb up really gnarly stuff. And I also fell in love at the similar time with climbing. And I think like those rope skills and lead climbing, trad climbing was like something that totally translated into ski mountaineering. And
Right.
most of the ski mountaineers I know also climb, which is pretty cool.
You really do it all, I feel. I just watched the Mountain Y the other
Mhm.
night, with you and Cody biking. What was it?
It was over 1,000 miles.
Over 1,000 miles to ski three lines,
3 lines,
three
yeah.
lines. Um, and I was just like, well, one thing I really noticed was obviously your fitness. And it's like your fitness is like beyond like doing push-ups and hitting a hit circuit and then, going out and performing in the mountains. It's like you just never stop moving in the mountains. So your fitness is always kind of like just adapting to whatever like next challenge your body has to do. And I'm like just watching you, it's like Energizer Bunny, like go.
That's how I
Um
feel. It's a little
that's
too much sometimes. I'm like, "Calm it down, Michelle."
right.
Yeah,
Um,
I think I don't do gym workouts and that kind of stuff. I have a really hard time being inside. And so the outdoors, whether that's biking, like any form of biking, because biking for me totally is a mirror reflection of skiing. I'm like, I love every aspect of it and will
right,
do every aspect of it.
right. So
But
how did this project come together? Like Cody called you up. He's like, come ski some of the 50 project lines with me. Like, how did that come to be?
it was my birthday, and I didn't really ski during quarantine. It was definitely looked down upon at the time. I was very
Mm,
confused about it all. There was a couple powder days where I was in tears, but I was like, there's way worse things going on right now.
yeah.
Like, it's all good.
Wait, let's pause on that for a second because I would love to. Yeah, I do love how open you are with, blending both your professional skiing life and also uh, current events. What was your process on making the decision to step back from skiing during quarantine and the full lockdown that would have been March, April? Because I know some people skied and they didn't share about it, or they did share about it, and it was a very spicy topic amongst the industry at that
Totally.
time. So I'd love to hear kind of like, yeah, what was going on in your mind at that time?
For the life of me, Katie, I can't lie. I can't tell a lie. So like
Mm,
I couldn't go out there, and then like I had a bunch of like local nurse friends sending me stats and being like, "Can you please ask people to like chill on your Instagram?" Like there was a lot of
right.
social pressure. And so
Yeah.
I did, at times I would repost what the nurse would send me and be like, "Can you please spread this message?" Cuz Tahoe was crazy, I think. But
Mm,
I didn't even know though, cuz I was literally just at my house. the first
Mm-hmm.
thing I did is I bought like an indoor trainer. I was like, I need a hamster wheel, and I just started riding my bike inside, and then that would like totally calm my nerves. But
Yeah.
yeah, I pretty much just like kept it super safe, and it was just, I think back then there was so many unknowns, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I couldn't be that big of a hypocrite and go skiing and tell other people not to. Like, that ain't in my blood. So I just
Yeah.
didn't. And then it was my birthday, and I called Cody and Elise, and I was like, do you guys want to go for a ski tour? Like, something super mellow. The snow was total shit. It was like really quite safe. And we went up, and then the whole time on the skin track, Cody started telling me about this idea he had. And it literally went like this. Like, he was like, so I'm gonna ride my bike from Tahoe, and then I'm gonna go ski these things. And like, I interrupted him, and I was like, can I come? And he was like, I mean, yeah, totally. And then like we continued the conversation, and it was like as simple as that. And then a week and a half into our trip, I was like, wait, I always wondered, like, were you gonna invite me or did I invite myself? And he was like, I was totally gonna invite you, but you definitely invited yourself too. I was like, sick. Well, I'm down. But
I
that's
feel
like how
like
it should be.
I feel like having watched the film, he's probably really glad you were there. That is not something you'd want to do alone.
No, you wouldn't want to do it alone. And like, I think one of my favorite parts about that film, honestly, was Cody and my relationship, and
Totally.
about that trip, not the film necessarily, because it's hard to portray in the film. But you go into the mountains with these people and you spend so much time with them. And on that trip in particular, it's like you're always hungry, you're always
Mm,
tired, you're cranky, you're at your lowest of lows, you're at your highest of highs. Like, there's a lot of like emotion
vulnerable.
and, yeah, vulnerable moments. And
Mm-hmm.
I think Cody and I have always been really solid mountain partners, and like, I'm the little sister for sure. And that's been our relationship. And I'm also like really tight with Elise. And then so we went on the trip, and we're like, we're the two best friends going on this adventure. And then like a week and a half, I was like, I can't stand this guy. Like, what was I thinking? Like,
Right.
he smells super bad, and I don't want to be on this trip with him. And then we like kind of got this really interesting, there was like a bit of a competitive vibe, and like we were racing each other. Like, I was like, I trained so hard for this trip, and Cody didn't train. Like, when I'm out front, just let me be out front for once. Like, I'm so proud of this. And then he'd like come up and be out front and like be trying so hard to pass me, and I was like, damn it, Cody, like, just let a girl be out front for a second. And then
And you keep saying in the movie, and now we have the background. You're like, yeah, I don't have like all the gears, so I just like don't have as many gears as Cody. Just so you guys know. Now that I hear this, I'm like,
totally.
okay.
But I was like totally bitterly being like, yeah, he has lower gears, he can pedal uphill faster than me. Like, it's not fair. We have the same amount of weight on our bike, and he's faster, and I'm trying harder. But anyways, we got to Rainier, and it was like raining for 2 weeks. And
Right.
that was, after the death of George Floyd, the country was going absolutely nuts. There was so much going on. And we had this like really beautiful, vulnerable conversation that like pretty well could only have with people that are that close to you.
Mm,
And it was like, honestly, it was Cody like peeled back the layers of my personality and was like consciously giving me like, I don't know, kind of tips on how to be a better person. And it's
mm,
vulnerable when you hear that from someone. It's like
mm-hmm.
really deeply vulnerable. But the way that he was saying it and the space we were in, like, I was able to kind of accept it in this like a gracious way of being like thankful for what he was saying. And I think ultimately from that day on, we became like inseparably tight,
Yeah,
and like we had each other's backs, and it was beautiful. And we worked through all the kinks and just were like, yep, we are like,
we're a
let's do
team.
this. Yeah.
So not to pry, but what were kind of like the takeaways from the conversation for you, like moving forward? What really resonated?
I'm trying to remember now. That's a really good question. I probably have it written down in my journal. But I think for me, it was like, yeah, we talked a lot about like the way that females operate, and like, because
Mm,
I work really closely with Elise and doing safe as and stuff like that. So we work
yeah.
together. We're really close friends. We ski together. We've done a really good job at like maintaining that tight friendship through all of that. But I
Hmm.
think like Cody probably hears everything from Elise, and I'm just
Yeah.
like my own person. So like we just started talking about relationship stuff, and like and he kind of was, yeah, it was like pretty just like, you could be a little bit less like, I don't even remember what it was, actually, to be totally honest. Like, I can't
Either way,
remember
it
it.
softened
Yeah.
you to each other from like the first week of this competitiveness kind of a thing to it's so interesting how those kind of like sticky those you bump up against someone like, two fists, and then there's this stickiness. And if you can kind of wade through that stickiness together, like, then it's like the softness that comes on the other side of that is, yeah, it feels so good all the time. The
That
hardest part is the anticipation of the conversation, and then the first like two sentences of the conversation. But once you're in it, you're like, oh yeah, all I really want is for you to show up, fully, and me to be able to show up fully, and us to be able to actually deeply connect.
Yeah, yeah, totally. And that was the beauty of it all. And you nailed it on the head. Like it's sticky. And like yeah, moving through that with him, then we talked about like I brought it up. I was like, "Why are you so competitive with me out there? Like,
Mm.
what's up with that?" And he was like, "Okay, to be totally honest, he's like, when I grew up racing, my number one competition was Julia Mancuso. I just wanted to beat her." And I was like, "Oh my God, this is amazing." And he was like, "I didn't view her as like a different gender than me, or like I'm a guy and she's a girl. I just viewed her as my biggest competition." And he was like, "I don't view you as any different. Like you're my equal and I'm competing against you." And I was like, "Whoa, mega props. I love that you like are treating me like anyone else and you're not like giving me room to be a girl. You're just like,
Mm.
man up, girl." Like, or like that's like a terrible thing to say, but like
No, but it's so interesting because it's like, I don't know. I just had this conversation this morning with someone because we posted this or launched this vocal campaign that we're doing, and it's a women's campaign. And someone DM'd me and said, there's only campaigns for women and BIPOC people because we're not seen as equals yet. And I sort of said, well, don't you think that there's a bit of a swing spectrum that we need to go on to get to the other side of this gender conversation, or the other side of the racial conversation, until, we need to hear stories until those stories have been heard enough to sort of neutralize. And she said, well, no, because it's not about being seen. It's about being completely understood as equals. And we kind of had this back and forth, and I'm not sure about the beyond gender stuff sometimes. I do think that there needs to be stories told, but I also understand that, yeah, there aren't campaigns, for white dudes because they don't, there hasn't been a journey for them where they need to be seen. But if for, 1,000 years, there's only women's campaigns, well, maybe we're going to need to have dudes campaigns for white dudes, and, and in dynasties, in
yeah.
space. I don't know how far forward in the future it's going to take, but to recover. But it's an interesting thing where you're like, I want to be seen as an equal. And it often takes, right now anyway, it takes someone else just acknowledging that equality sometimes, and whether it's gender or whether it's just someone you really look up
Mhm.
to be seen as an equal is incredibly empowering. So
Yeah.
I bet that felt good, whether you say man up or not, because expressions don't die over 3 to 6 months. When we all kind of woke up, I feel, this year and said, wow, we have a lot of language that we need to shift. Or you were mentioning like squaw, looking at its name and looking at the legacy of its name and saying, yeah, this isn't going to work anymore. We all woke up collectively in a huge way this year. I can't believe it took what it took, but here we
Yeah.
are. So I hear you on all these levels of
You're
why that
exactly
felt.
right. Yeah, the fact that he looked at me as an equal was ultimately empowering, and I think it brought me closer to him because I understood that.
Yeah.
And I also I'm just going to apologize for saying man up because I'm definitely conscious of my language and that is not something that I want in my language. So,
No, but I hear you. I really hear you. I mean, the general idea of the film was to answer this: why we do it, why we do what we do. What was it? What was the massive takeaway for people that haven't seen the film?
Cody and I would probably answer this a little bit differently, but I think we definitely both bounce off of each other's ideas. For me, the why became the journey. Like, you're not
Mm-hmm.
doing it to accomplish something necessarily. You're doing it to test yourself. And when you set out to do something that you don't know is even possible, like when I left, I was like, I legitimately don't know if this is possible for me to ride my 100-pound bike up there and ski these lines. Like, I don't know if I can do this.
Mm-hmm.
And we left with that unknown. But when you ride through it and you like accomplish that for yourself, you break down these barriers that you might have put on yourself subconsciously. Like that's the why. That's like, it's ultimately character building. And you do change in your perception of yourself, and you grow, and you like, I don't know, there's both a softness and a hardness to that too. Like I
Mm,
became like really open with Cody. Like we had this beautiful relationship, and Bjarne as well. And then there was
mm,
also moments where it was like, dig deep, put your head down, and like focus on the goal. And no matter how badly your body hurts, like just get through it. And
mhm.
but I think it's the journey for me. It's the relationships that you have with the people you're on the journey with. That is the why. It's like this beautiful, almost unexplainable thing. But what, the relationships that I have with my close mountain partners is
Mhm.
run so much deeper than I have with just any old friend. Like if I spend time on the skin track with someone, I'm like, we have a whole nother like bond that's there, because
Mhm.
you both have this understanding that like if we're out touring together, like you're going to save my life and I'm going to save your life potentially. Like there's this mutual understanding, and the mountains are serious business. And I think that being in those moments, and those really vulnerable moments with people, is like such a beautiful thing that we don't really often get to experience in our everyday
No.
lives.
No, I mean, yeah, someone you go for coffee with, you're not chances are the cafe isn't potentially gonna blow up and you might have to save their life. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
having that sort of back in your mind where I'm responsible for your life at the same time that we're like chit-chatting about snacks and the weather, um, definitely creates a bond. I also think what you're saying with this, like, your relationship to the journey is really an interesting thing and something I wanted to kind of chat about more because it's like I think some people have this like inherent Energizer bunny factor to their personalities and then others don't. And I think it's interesting to sort of just look at this um, concept of internal motivation uh, to a certain limit as just a theme in and of itself. Like it's applicable to someone with a 9 to 5 as well. Like why do you go back to a job, or why do you stick with something, or why do you take up a new sport in your free time, or what is it why you do anything, and I think what you're saying about this, or why does anyone do anything, and I think what you're saying, like, about this, it's self-worth. It's like creating a new edge for yourself, taking yourself there, going past it, and understanding that you can.
Hmm.
And then I look at you now and you're saying, okay, now I'm in Jackson and I'm training for this year. And I'm wondering what having that gone past your edge in the spring, both, physically with shooting this film, mentally, emotionally with examining yourself. I mean, you're very open with kind of the stuff you're going through mentally, looking at racial injustice, things that are happening in your community, COVID-19, politics, whatever. Um, you went past everyone. I think a lot of people went past their edge this year. And now you're heading into this season. And do you feel different? What feels different? Do you feel different? And if so, how? Like looking at the winter coming ahead.
I think that the biggest takeaway from that trip, like towards my sport anyways, is like, yeah, like Jackson to me, an average day of ski touring here is like 6,000 feet. And you do that 3 days at least in a row. And then you might go for like one really big day that's like 7 grand and like 15 miles or something into the Alpine. And you have to be physically fit to do that all the time. It takes,
For
we
sure.
we were joking the other day, it's like a 10-day period of getting like, okay, we're in Teton shape. Like, here we go. But
Yeah.
now I'm kind of like, I'm good. Like I can
Mm.
suffer with the best of them. I know I've got this. Like I can push through. My physical limits are like, yeah, the bar is high. And knowing, like really understanding how my body works and how my body functions. And for women, that's a totally different thing than it is for men. And it's
Mm.
been really cool to fine tune that. And then just, yeah, I think, that trip, we also had 10 hours on the bike every day to listen and to learn. And that was
Mm.
like, the way I process emotions, and I say it in the film, is by doing exercise. But then the way we were doing exercise, I was like, this is crazy. And like, if I had a different color skin, this would be a totally different experience. And kind of analyzing my entire career and why I do what I do. Like, I think that's an important question for all of us to ask ourselves, is why do you do this? What is your life purpose?
For
What is
sure.
your purpose in your sport and your career? Like, those are really important questions, because for me, they help drive me to that like finish line, or they helped keep me going. And So my old purpose was a lot more geared towards inspiring women and getting more women on screen. And I'm a big believer in, if you see it, you can believe it. So if I see Elise hit a huge cliff, I'm like, oh yeah, I can do that too. Like that's
Mm-hmm.
inspirational to me. But then I realized that we were missing like this huge portion of the why for me. Anyways, I was like, I've been pushing for this whole time, but like, what about like all of the lack of representation of BIPOC and transgender and
Mm.
the gender, everything was like, it was just so in the face at that point in time. And it really made me realize that like my purpose was not deep enough in skiing.
Mm.
And I think that as an athlete and in my position, I do have the ability to bring more people in and to to be a good ally. And that's become more of my purpose than doing it for the girls. It's like it's become so much more in depth of like telling real stories, for example, that like create change rather than just skiing on film. And I think my goals moving forward are very much more encompassing with that in mind. And so it definitely changed my entire perception of my life and my why, for sure.
Which is, yeah, which is just the evolution. Like this is the evolution for the entire species, like the human species right now,
Yeah.
is we have to move away from this individualistic kind of, it's about me or it's about my part, to look at skiing in a vacuum, or look at skiing as an example, like it's about me. And then, well, now it's about my gender, and now it's about people like me. Well,
Mhm.
no, like we all have to move into this different kind of collective mindset where it's like it's about us, and I'm here for you and you're here for me, and like we're working towards a better, future for everyone. And that's like the equality of the species. And I'm not talking like communism,
Mhm.
I'm talking like better lives for people on earth.
Yeah.
And you're right, you do have a platform and you do have an opportunity. And I mean, you've beat the game already. If you're looking to have a successful ski career, you beat the game. So you can go back and start again, or you can, evolve. And you're doing a really incredible job, I think, of, yeah, being aware of it, which is kind of step one. And then also being just really open and humble about what the process is to have that kind of what's the word? It's like responsibility, opportunity, um, to share like that, to share what you love with other people.
What's the work that I can do personally, like in my life, to like be aware of the racist tendencies that are in all of us, like how
Mhm.
can I dismantle that for myself?
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, become aware, like look at all these different perspectives and dismantle that in myself. And like that's a constant lifelong like process, I think, for
Yeah,
all of us. And then
for
like
sure.
furthermore, okay, in my position, what can I do to help in this way? And that's like, yeah, I'm going to call up all my sponsors and know that they're having this conversation internally and
Mhm.
make sure that it is like continued to have this conversation. And
Mm.
not that I'm like, I am not the perfect example and I don't know everything, but like I can at least like help perpetuate that conversation and grow that. And then like what other platforms do I have? Well, I have Originate. Like how can I be more inclusive in that space? And how can you build these relationships and ultimately lift people up? And just like, yeah, it's a constant thing that like I'm working on. But I think as athletes, like we can do more than what a lot of us think we can do. And it's important to like think of all those options and continue to drive at them. And going back to what you were saying about like, it's really interesting hearing you say that, because when I was 18 roughly, I had a really difficult time with my profession. I was like, this feels so selfish. Like,
Mm.
the ski industry was fat. It was before 2008 when the depression happened. Like we had money to spend and we were traveling the world on other people's dimes. And like at the end of the day, I was like, is this fulfilling? Like, am I adding to a greater society with my
Right.
job or not? And I was like, no, I couldn't like figure it out. And then I was like, okay, maybe I can build a platform where I can be philanthropic and I can find this purpose. And that became, all about like bringing more women in and like pushing with that. And then all of a sudden that's like morphed, and it's exactly what you're saying. And I look at that work as being mandatory. Like we need to
Yeah,
all be doing that.
100%.
And a lot of that is behind closed doors, and it's just like that is like everyone needs to step up and do their part and continue to do it.
And it's going to look different for different people, right? Like it's, I want to go back to what you're saying about Originate and how, that's become kind of this outlet for you, or this place where you have a lot of creative control, you have a lot of agency. Like what's been the evolution of Originate? Like how did that come to be? And then how is it kind of morphed into being this, really kind of great way for you to self-express and continue to evolve as an athlete and entertainer?
Yeah, totally. So I've worked with Matchstick for so many years, and I'm so grateful for the opportunity that I've had with them. But it ultimately became a place where I was like, well, this isn't like, it's not keeping me engaged enough. Like, it's really easy. I can just go, show up, ski, come home. Like, it's easy. And then I wanted more of a challenge. And I also wanted to have more control over what I did and who I did it with and the stories that were told. And I've been obsessed with storytelling through film rather than like, I do love the action based films. I think there's totally a place for that. But for me, like, I love character development. I love getting to know the people in the film because then I have an emotional attachment to them and I celebrate with them when they do something good. And I'm like, oh no, when they do something bad. And they fall away from it.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of the goal with Originate. I knew Cam and Brian, my amazing partners on it, for a while. And they, I reached out to them and I was like, hey, I want to like go off the norm for myself, and I want to like start something with you guys. And I also noticed that I felt like, you know, Red Bull has a huge platform and they support so many women, but there wasn't a lot of female driven content coming out. And I thought it was really important to have that on there as well. And so I kind of approached them like, hey, like, we need more female driven content. And they're like, totally, green lit, we agree, and gave me this platform. And then the first year, I remember everyone was like, you've got the torch, like run with it. And I was still like, okay, it's me and it's like my whole guy crew. And like, I realized that I didn't know how to be a leader. And it took me a long time to understand how to be a leader and how to do that in a way that was really uplifting, and how to manage that and my ski career and still show up and ski really well and like separate those things. But the first year was like a bit trial and error for me. I was like, okay, we're going, but I got mega stressed. And then year two, I was like, oh my gosh, it's so much easier. Like, I learned so much in the last year of being my own PR agent, of helping to produce, of making sure that all the ducks were in a row. And I mean, Brian and Cam do so much too. They do way more than me with Originate, but you know, I co-produced and I helped a lot. And like, that like addition to my skiing career was a lot to take on. But now I feel like I have a way better like steadier head with how to be a leader and how to like manage this. Like, I've been doing this for my whole life basically. Like, I know how to make a ski film. Like, it's not rocket science, you just have to do it. But like, it took me a while to own that position and to have the confidence. And to be straight up honest, like, Red Bull giving me that opportunity and doing Originate taught me so much about like my own self-confidence and like having a voice and still being in a really male dominated space, but using that voice and taking up that space with confidence, I think was a huge lesson and takeaway.
Like, it made you more confident.
Oh yeah. It was like so empowering that like this massive company basically gave me this project that I asked for and then said, run with it, and allowed me to, and have continued to support it. Like, yeah, that's empowering for sure.
Did you have moments of imposter syndrome at the beginning of that? Like, just, I mean, holding a torch is hard. Like, being in the front is hard. You know,
yeah, I don't know if it's imposter syndrome. I never felt like I didn't deserve it or I was doing something wrong. I think it was just like, it was overwhelming. And it was also like, I think it was finding my own voice as a female.
Yeah.
Like that, like, to be totally honest, like I was working with all guys, and finding my own voice was a process for sure, which I thought I already had before that. But then you're like, you have so much more responsibility. And you're like, oh, I need to figure this out.
Well, I feel like it continues to evolve too. Just as even as we become more and more open about what it is to be a woman and a woman's process, like even what you were saying earlier, and like training and being out in the mountains is different for a woman than it is for a man. Like, we do have different energy cycles, and we do, we have a 28 or whatever day, however many days yours is, like, cycle that we actually are different on,
Yeah, and men's have the men's cycle is 24 hours and they're peaking during happy hours. So like, the world is designed for them, where I'm like, I need a nap, like, or whatever.
Yeah. Or I just need to stop for a second on the skin track and just say how I feel, and I need everyone to stop and listen, and then we can keep going. Whatever it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's really neat, and both like confidence building, both as a leader, both as a creator, both as an athlete, or all of these things. Like this project gave you so much.
So much. And like Brian and Cam, the two cinematographers that I work with, are both incredible human beings, but they were like, I don't know if they were aware of the way that they were empowering me, but they've given me a lot of like space to say what I want, need, and to direct and to be that producer. Like they are a really good team. Like they treat me like an equal. They listen to me. They have so much respect, and like I
Mm.
have endless respect back to them because it's been a mutual thing. Like, and I remember last year on one of my last interviews, and Cam was asking me questions. It wasn't last year, it was the year before. It was after I skied two of the best lines I ever skied in Alaska. And he was like interviewing me, and we both just started crying. And he
Aw.
was like, "It's so cool to see where you've come from and like to see where you are now." And I was like, "Cam, it's because of you. Like, this is the coolest process. It's like really amazing. Yeah, it's special."
It comes back to the relationships.
Exactly. Right.
It's so interesting, hey?
Yeah.
It's like the line is, yeah, it's symbolic of so many other things, feeling comfortable with who you're with, like feeling, supported, all these different things.
Mhm.
That's so cool. So you're in Jackson right now, and what's happening there? You're training, you're skiing, are you filming? What are you doing?
Yeah, well, I think I downplay like my purpose out here. I used to joke like I'm just going on my Jackson vacation, but for me, this is a place where I can be challenged like pretty
Mm,
heavily in the mountains. The park here, the Tetons are a mountain range that have stolen my heart since I saw them. I think the first time I came here was maybe 4 years ago or so,
mm.
and so I've been
Oh,
chipping.
not that long ago.
Yeah, not at all. I've been chipping away at getting to know this mountain range and finding my own confidence in this mountain range as well. And I think, coming here, like I said, you have really big days like every day, and so you get really fit, and then you're also getting to practice your mountaineering skill. And the people that I've found myself going in the mountains with here are like some of the partners that I respect the most for their understanding of the snowpack and the mountains and these bigger lines. And they're in it every single day. Like we don't really take too many days off here. And my friends certainly don't take too many days off here. A lot of them are exam guides. And so they're just going full throttle. And I always joke, I'm like, how do you do 30 days on and like 1 day off? Um, but they are incredibly strong, and it's just a place where I can hone in my skills and get strong and feel like I'm in the right place like for my season.
So you feel like you have good people there though, good support network.
Such good people. Yeah, my partners are incredibly strong, and like I'm learning every single day from them. Like I love asking questions because
Yeah.
yeah, they play in big mountains all the time. And
And how did you meet them? How did you connect with this
to be
crew?
totally honest, through Arc'teryx Academy, like
Oh,
so
cool.
I feel like I know the entire exam guide staff, which I
So it's
probably
like Mike Gardner and those guys?
My
Is he
main
Exum?
partners, yep, totally. I would say Zahan Billamorier is one of
Yep.
my main partners, and I actually have taken some big mountain kind of avalanche courses from Zahan. So he inherently, when you're the student, he becomes your mentor. And yeah, I'm going skiing with him tomorrow. So he's been someone who I've really looked up to a lot. And
Cool.
Solving for Z, if you haven't seen that movie, is a really amazing movie. But yeah, Zahan, then Ben Hoynes, Clark Bird is one of my favorites. He's a split boarder. Murphy, and then Nick Russell is
Mhm.
my kind of partner from Tahoe, who we've been coming out here for a few years together, or not together, but we always end up here at the same time and
Right.
that every day. Yeah.
Cool. So you'll spend like a month in Wyoming and then head back to California, or what's your
I don't know. This year is so tricky.
yeah.
I am kind of planning on keeping it relatively local, at least in the US, and driving
Yeah.
to wherever I can go and trying to still be super aware of the pandemic. Like I've been getting tested before I leave and then when I get home too. So I know I'm not transporting anything.
Right.
And then staying in locations for like a longer period of time is kind of what I would like to do, not
Yeah,
bouncing
right.
around a ton.
Right.
Yeah, and then I'm here with Hannah Beeman and Elena Height. They're getting ready for natural selection, so we're hanging here. I got a good girl squad, and I'd love to add too. Like I have been meeting so many incredible female partners here as well, which I'm
Mm.
really excited to like get more female partners in these mountains as well.
Yeah, Jackson, I don't know. Jackson, last year was the first time I'd ever been to Jackson and Jackson Hole. And I was also like immediately hooked, blown away. very intimidated, like just so impressed with everyone that I felt like I was meeting. I do have like the imposter syndrome thing. I was like asking that question to you. You're like, no. I'm like, okay, this is just you, Katie, projecting, but I definitely do have it. And I was like, it was like it felt very strong for me in Jackson Hole. I was like, everyone here is so dialed and experienced and casual about it as a result. And you can just feel in that place like everyone's a wealth of knowledge. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The ski patrollers, like every single person I chatted to, I felt was just like so full of so much mountain knowledge and just like fully imbued with it as a result of living in that place.
Yeah, totally. I mean, they spend every day in like massive mountains and
Mhm.
with the goal of getting higher into those mountains and going into the alpine, and you have to be really on it to like take it to that line as often as people do here. And I think that, I've been to Chamonix and I loved Chamonix, but I was a little overwhelmed with the like different approach to mountains there than I feel here. And I don't know.
In what sense? What's different? I don't know
I
the
don't know.
answer.
They're like two really big mountains. People are getting after it. Like Jackson's basically the Chamonix of North America. Like it's
Right.
the place where people are ski mountaineering at a really high level.
Right.
And there's a huge guide service here. And I think really highly of Exum. Like I love that's where I've gained a lot of partners and a lot of knowledge. But I feel like a lot of people die over there. And that, I mean, maybe it was my own experience. I was there on what the newspapers dubbed the deadliest day in the European or in the Alps. And it was like
Ugh.
kind of gnarly it was a gnarly trip when I was there. And I was just like, man, I don't know, like my comfort with bigger terrain. I noticed myself when I was there, like I'd kept justifying things and be like, oh yeah, that line goes. Like I'm totally comfortable skiing under that massive Serac for the entire run. And like it was just justifying things that like normally I probably wouldn't be that comfortable with.
Mm.
And for myself, like longevity is really important. So I try to be really conscious and cautious when I'm in the mountains, and I don't want to take it right up to the line all the time. Like
No.
I've had some trips where like I felt that and I needed to decompress. Like I came home and I was like, whoa, I need to decompress. Like we were right on the line that whole
That
trip.
was too
It was
close.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, just like you're exposed. And to be totally honest, like I love what I do. I do not want to die doing what
No.
I do. And my
No.
family's lost a child. Like my older brother passed away, and like I'm coming home to my family. Like I don't want to risk that ever. And
Yeah.
that's a big thing for me, for sure. And that's a very real thing in our sport. I've seen it too much.
It's very real and it's I mean it's heartbreaking and it's also like, you know, with what you're saying with this evolution that you've gone on from being, skiing inbounds and hitting cliffs inbounds to park skiing, well, even with racing, and then now to the evolving into mountaineering, like it's not mellow, it's not casual, you're not going for a walk in the park, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
You are taking a different level of a risk, and yeah, I mean, what's the mental process there? How do you pull it back? What's the conversation you're having with yourself and having the confidence to say no, to say you wanna turn around? I feel like people always wanna know, like, how do the pros know when to turn around? How do they call it?
Yeah, totally. Well, I'll use the other day as an example. I went up with one of my partners, and it was just the two of us, and we were going up with two lines on the mind. And one of them is a straight up and down couloir. It's absolutely beautiful, and you approach it bottom up, so you're hiking up the couloir. And the other line is a top down line that you wrap into off a cliff. And I'd never skied either, but I was pretty fired up on either. But we went out there, and then there was like an avalanche the day before, and we got to the base of the couloir, which you would hike bottom up, and dug a pit, and we had a lot of conversations, like really beautiful conversations. I love these conversations and decision making in the mountains if you have a good partner.
Mm,
And ultimately, like the line that was top down that you wrap off the cliff for was a safer go for sure. And because you can mitigate avalanche terrain from the top down a lot easier than if you're hiking up it, right? And so at the end of the conversation, we went with the top down line, and for me it was like, yeah, you can hang it out there, but if there's a level of unknown and you're right in the middle, like we were both being super indecisive. And I just said, I was like, I can't make a decision based on our pit, based on the recent knowledge that we have, whether it's not a green light and it's not a red light. It's like somewhere in the middle. And so for myself personally right now, like I'm more comfortable with what I know, which is this top down line. Like I'm psyched on it. Like, let's just do that. And he was like, yep, cool, let's do that. Like we talked for probably 30 minutes about it.
Wow.
And who knows, like maybe it would have been fine to go for the other line. It was untracked. The line we skied was tracked. Like there was that, and then that's it. Like we went to the line we were going to ski and it was totally tracked. And I was like, oh, and then that's a human factor. If you're like, oh, let's not do this because it's tracked. Let's go to this couloir and hike it because we get first tracks. Like that's
Totally.
a red flag for me. And I brought that up. I was like, I feel weird that we're making this decision based on tracks. And that is a human factor, actually, like in facets, the acronym about avalanche awareness. And so, yeah, we ultimately had that conversation and decided to go with the more conservative choice. And some days the mountains are screaming, yes, come get it, like come play. And other times there's that question mark. And I think it's just important to be really open with your partners and have those conversations and be really honest with yourself. And for me, like a question that I ask myself often, which I really love, is, am I doing this for myself? And it sounds like a pretty easy question. Like so simple, but like if I'm being honest with myself, I can answer that really easily. If I'm like, I'm doing this because I'm with a photographer and I'd rather get the shot, that's like a pretty obvious, no, I'm not doing this for myself. Or if I'm like, yeah, I just hit my head and I'm kind of dizzy, and that's another like, no. But if I'm doing it for myself, I'll feel it and I'll be like, yes, I'm like, boom, we're good to go. Like, and that simple question, asking myself that in moments of doubt, has been really helpful to mitigate making wrong choices because of ulterior motives or ulterior pressures. I think that ultimately at the end of the day, it all comes down to having the most fun. And so make sure no matter what you're doing, you're having the most fun, and do it for yourself. That's really important.
That was Michelle Parker. So fun to hear from such a powerful voice from the ski industry. You can find Michelle at Michelle Parker on Instagram, and you can find Originate on YouTube. Thanks for tuning in to The Arc of It. I'm your host, Katie Burrell.